people are always looking for something to blame about why Star Wars isn't exactly like it was for them when they were kids. Whether that's Disney, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, George Lucas, Rian Johnson, people are always looking for something to lay the blame on for why Star Wars doesn't feel the same to them anymore. We need to stop looking for people to blame. You can make a bad movie, you can make a good movie. It happens. Filmmakers make mistakes. Sometimes Star Wars is not going to be great. Sometimes it's just going to be bad. It's so popular, there's going to be more, and we have to just come to terms with that. We need to stop looking for people or corporations to blame for why something isn't the same way that it was for us when we were younger, because it's never going to be that way, because we had a different worldview then. We looked at entertainment in a much more hopeful way.
I was watching a review from Chris Stuckmann, and it was part of a couple of reviews that I've been watching just to gauge the aftermath of The Rise of Skywalker, to get different perspectives from different people. And Chris Stuckmann has his opinion, and to be honest, I don't care what his opinion is. He can love the movie, he can hate it, he can justify it, he cannot. He's entitled to that. But the part where I took serious issue was when he tried to play therapist. He tried to play PhD. He was going to become Dr. Phil, and he was going to get in your head, and he was going to tell you and tell me why we don't like certain Star Wars movies. Now, I have no problem with him liking the movie or not liking the movie or whatever he happens to think. But for me, the moment that you start trying to explain why other people think the way they do, and you come across as condescending and as arrogantly as he did, well, I'm going to have an issue with that. Because that's one of the reasons why I made this channel, because you constantly have people taking this attitude, whether it's celebrities, whether it's the media, whether it's corporations, whether it's YouTubers. Now, I could say a lot of stuff about Chris Stuckmann, about the fact that he's a bootleg Jeremy Jahns, about the fact that he has this trait that I find absolutely ridiculous when it comes to reviewing movies, where these guys sit amongst their merch and they want to throw out dispersions against you. They're basically peacocking. Say, oh, look at all the DVDs I have. Oh my God, I have this statue of Goku. Doesn't that make me more credible in what I have to say? No, it doesn't. It just makes you look pathetic. It makes you look pathetic. Jeremy Jahns has a green screen. He actually put some effort into his production. He is the main attraction. So when I look at somebody like this, I don't generally take them very seriously because they don't take themselves seriously. And clearly from what he said, he has no respect for Star Wars, the franchise, the fans. He doesn't have any respect for anyone's opinion but his own. Because if you can sit there and say, well, the reason people don't like Star Wars is because really they want to be children again. They want that nostalgia. They want that feeling when they were a child. To say that, to me, is about as clueless and ignorant as Kathleen Kennedy saying that Star Wars is different from the MCU because they don't have any comic books to fall back on. Star Wars has not only comic books, but video games, novels. They have so much extended universe material to pull from. And this guy to say, well, you don't like the movies because this reason, you're just wrong. I don't like the movies because they are disrespectful, because they are propaganda, because they are created by feminist activists like Kathleen Kennedy that have this idea that you have to put in this type of messaging, this type of diversity, this type of wokeness into your movies. And when you do that, you diminish the entire experience. Now, why would you hire Rian Johnson? I don't know. He was not qualified to make those movies, and clearly he was not of the right temperament or mindset. He is as disrespectful and clueless about what a hero is than anyone that I've ever seen in Hollywood, other than maybe Kathleen Kennedy herself. But Chris Stuckmann's disrespect, his dismissal of criticism of Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson is, well, it's just, they did their best, but it's just nostalgia. People are so nostalgic that they'll say anything. They'll criticize anyone. No, that's not true. Because I watch channels like Star Wars Theory, Star Wars Comics. I watch channels that focus on Star Wars lore. I really, really liked Star Wars Theory's video where he did a fan film. I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was great. And it showed the passion that people have. Now, Star Wars Theory, his reaction to The Rise of Skywalker was positive. Mine was negative. I don't hold that against him. I'm genuinely happy he liked the movie. But you know what he didn't do? Star Wars Theory didn't get on camera and say, well, the reason that people like Fan Advocacy Network and the reason why people who are critical of the movie don't like the movie is because of this, and it's because they want to go back to their childhood, and basically saying that we're man babies. Now, I find that to be obnoxious. I find that to be ridiculous. I find that to be beneath the dignity of being a reviewer. Not that there's much dignity in being a reviewer to begin with. I am a reviewer, and I can say that. The fact is that what Chris Stuckmann said was just simply not true. People don't like these movies for many different reasons, but here's the important part. Here's what I want to say. There are people who like the original trilogy, like the prequels, but also like the books and the comics and the video games. And the video games and the comics and all of this stuff, they're relatively new. Or, they go back for years and decades. But there's stuff still coming out. So you can't say that, well, you only like this because of this reason. No, the stories that are good are considered good. They're called good. People recognize them as good. The stories that are bad, people recognize are bad. It really is that simple. There is no, well, I really want to be a child, so I don't like this. What is that? That is a weak and cowardly way to avoid putting responsibility on the people who mess this up. Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy, Chuck Wendick, Pablo Hidalgo, the garbage to your show media, Raylos, these degenerate, disgusting, politically active, hyperbolic, anti-fan, anti-consumer people working in Lucasfilm and orbiting that particular ideology. It is an infectious miasma that needs to be removed if you want something to be received well. Now, notice that, well, The Mandalorian is being received well. That was created away from Kathleen Kennedy within the bounds of George Lucas's Star Wars world. You have the imagery, the visuals of Boba Fett and, Baby Yoda. You have the Mandalorians. You're going back into that world. There's a lot of stuff that works, and fans genuinely like it. So you can't tell me that it's simply because you want to feel like you were a kid again when people love The Mandalorian and hate these Disney trilogy movies. Chris Stuckmann, I want to be as diplomatic as I can, but I'm finding it hard because what you've done here is something that happens far too often. That you think because you have a perspective, because you have an opinion, because you don't respect the people who disagree with you, that gives you license to come out and say, well, I'm going to diagnose the reason for thinking what they think. How about this? How about sticking to your own opinion and why you think that, and let people like me state my opinion and why I think that, and let's not try to delve into each other's minds. Okay? I'm not delving into why you liked the movie or didn't like the movie or liked certain parts and didn't like others. I'm not going to analyze you because that's not my job. That's not what I do. I'm not a therapist. But for you to take that position against fans and be as disrespectful as you were, I take great issue with that. I don't accept that. I don't abide that. You can think whatever you want. Like Star Wars Theory. I'm not making a video about his reaction. I'm not making a video about him, even though I disagree with the fact that the movie, he liked the movie and I didn't. That's not the point. You can like the movie, you can hate the movie, but don't disrespect the fans. Because they're not wrong. Whether they like the movie or not, they're not wrong. But it is wrong when you start talking about the reason why they like or dislike it. Now, you can have your theories, you can have your ideas, but don't put that garbage out there. Like, well, this is what I think the reason why. Well, I could give the reason why I think you clutter yourself in merch that you bought as an adult, most likely. I could talk about the fact that you're a bootleg Jeremy Jahns, where he uses a green screen and actually is entertaining and interesting and charismatic, and that's why you watch him and he doesn't have to surround himself in garbage, and why somebody like you tries to fade out into the background. I could do that. I could talk about the mindset behind that. I could talk about why you are as predictable as any of these other shill channels that surround themselves in this overabundance of merch. In fact, I saw a Red Letter Media skit that was hilarious, that made fun of the peacocking and the surrounding yourself in just, oh, look at me, look at my nerd cred because I own this stuff. As an adult, I bought all this, so that makes me more of a nerd. That gives me more credibility. It doesn't. I could go into why you do that. Your insecurities, your clear lack of confidence in what you're doing. Whereas somebody like Jeremy Jahns just uses a green screen, gets in front of it, says his mind, says his piece, and have it be done. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try to delve into your way of thinking. The only thing I'm going to do is criticize, chastise, and condemn your your ability to instinctually come out against the fans. Just instinctually. I mean, and you're not the only one. Don't get me wrong. You're not the only one. There are many, 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 many people, companies, corporations, media types that do this. So don't think that it's just about you. You're not that special. I'm talking about this in context to a greater issue. And like I said, like I made very clear, doesn't matter if you liked the movie, doesn't matter if you didn't. The main point is that you have no right to sit there from your platform. And by the way, you have a much bigger platform than I do. You have a lot more subscribers. You've been doing it for longer. But I think that you have clearly lost perspective if you think the reason why people didn't like this movie is because there's something wrong with them. They want to go back to their childhood. I can tell you from experience, I do not want to go back to my childhood. I do not want to recapture the magic. I want new, innovative, and interesting stories. I want those stories told in a way that I find compelling. And you know what? I actually get that quite a bit. The only place I don't get that from is the Star Wars movies, which should exemplify the best in Star Wars, but it consistently exemplifies the worst. Knights of the Old Republic is a fantastic game. The characters, the story, the setup, the world building. Star Wars The Old Republic is a great game. It has 8 unique class stories. And each one is different, depending on what you want to play. Do you want to be a Jedi Consular, or do you want to be a Sith Warrior? Whatever you pick shapes the story, gives you more lore into Star Wars, gives you more access to characters, introduces so many new things, and that is what Star Wars can provide. When you get talented, intelligent, creative people sitting around making things that are Star Wars for the sake of being Star Wars, you can create magic. But when you get politically active busybodies like Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson and people who are more interested in narrative driving and focusing on this faux diversity, this fake wokeness, this progressivism, this anti-Trumpism, when you get all of that wrapped up in Star Wars, what you get is a character like Sue Rey that is on God mode the entire movie and obliterates the world. Rey is basically like somebody going in playing a game on a cheat mode. You know, it's a cheat mode. The entire world changes because it's not meant to incorporate somebody like that. It's not meant to incorporate somebody that is that overpowered without explanation. You have to build the character. Now, in the Old Republic, you have Sith warriors that are strong, and it makes sense because, well, I mean, you have the emergence of the Sith Order. You had the Jedi that were more in touch with their more ancestral roots, knew more Force abilities, more Force powers. It's all fascinating. It's all interesting. These Jedi are fighting, people like Bane and Exar Kun and all these amazing Sith warriors, even like Darth Revan. You have these Jedi that are dealing with these overwhelming powers, and so they rise to the occasion. I find that fascinating, and there's so much that you can do. But to say that I don't like these movies, or anyone doesn't like these movies, because of nostalgia, because I want to go back to being a kid, it's absolutely not true. It's ridiculous. And I'm doing a video. I don't know how long this is going to be. This has actually gone on a bit longer than I wanted to, or I initially thought. But what I would say is, to anyone who loves Star Wars but doesn't like these movies, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being critical and being honest. I know that people like Chris Stuckmann, it's a business to them. They make money. They want that access media. And so, yeah, sometimes there'll be a little bit of a shill. It's what happens when you put the business ahead of actually being a respectable critic. And so, my takeaway from this was just that you have this guy who wanted to do anything he could to avoid putting the blame on who it belonged to. And that is Kathleen Kennedy. She is one of the most incompetent leaders that I've ever seen. Hiring somebody like Rian Johnson to make The Last Jedi was a huge mistake. If you had brought in J.J. Abrams to do the second and third movie, I think we would be in a much better position than we are now. But, we're in a bad place because nobody had the balls to take a risk. Nobody had the vision to say, hey, why don't we bring in some people who know a thing or two about Star Wars? Why don't we bring in, what is that guy's name? Drew Kasparin, the guy who wrote Revan, the Revan book, the guy who worked for BioWare, working on stories of Knights of the Old Republic. Why don't we bring in him and a couple extremely talented guys to help write the layout for the story, the chapter beats that we want to hit, the things that we want said and proven and established in this movie. If you had done that, you'd be in a much better position than you are now. So, to Chris Stuckmann, I will say, my criticism is not based on nostalgia. It's not based on, well, Star Wars can do nothing right, and I'm just never happy with it because I like The Mandalorian. I love The Mandalorian. Love Baby Yoda. Think that's brilliant. I didn't love, but I liked Jedi Fallen Order. I liked... actually, no, that's not true. I loved, to this day, Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars The Old Republic. I love watching the YouTube channels that do the insight about the Star Wars characters, the extended universe, things about Thrawn. Rebels is fantastic. The Clone Wars series is amazing. So, do not sit there and tell me that I don't like Star Wars because I want to relive the magic of when I was a kid. Because that's not true for me, and that's not true for anyone who watches my videos. I know the people who watch my videos and myself don't like these movies because they're garbage. Because from the people making them, to the story, to what's being presented, to Rey being a Mary Sue God mode character, all of it is inferior. And we know what Star Wars can be. We know what Star Wars should be. We have a standard for this. Now, I think time has been very kind to the prequels, in combination with the fact that Disney's trilogy is just so bad. It's sort of like when somebody is not very attractive, but then you put an even uglier person next to them, and it makes the person who wasn't very attracted, now they're kind of attractive now. That's what you have with the prequels. It looks a lot better than it did because we've seen how bad things can be. Now, I personally didn't like Rogue One. I didn't like Solo. And I think that this marks an interesting point for Disney. They have a choice. More Mandalorian, more Obi-Wan, more George Lucas style movies, releasing the George Lucas cut of Star Wars would go a long way to reducing some of the bad will and animosity they've built up. But at the end of the day, the fans, Chris Stuckmann, and any other garbage tier media outlet who may be listening, they have every right to criticize. They have every right to call out, to say, I don't like this, to say, I reject this, to say, I'm not going to accept this. And for you to try to insult them, demean them, minimize them, reduce their opinion because of that, I find that contemptible, and I'm going to always call that out, because this channel is the Fan Advocacy Network. I advocate on behalf of fans. Their ability to be able to speak their mind and say what they want in regards to enjoying their hobby. It's their escapism, it's their fantasy, it's their choice. And if they don't like something in Star Wars, if they don't like something in Star Trek, they are perfectly ready and able to speak their mind, and they shouldn't be shot down or minimized by larger YouTube channels, by personalities, by reviewers, with people that don't have a PhD in psychology. They don't have any insight into the human mind, clearly. That themselves are just incredibly insecure, with the surrounding of the merch and the, oh, let me record this, surrounded by all the things that establish me as a nerd. Let me wear a nerd shirt. Let me just make this all about the nerd merch, and then just, kind of listen to what I have to say, rather than putting yourself out there and being what your opinion clearly is. Somebody like Jeremy Johns, who doesn't surround themselves in just stuff that they bought. Stuff that you bought doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't say anything about you. How you present yourself, the effort you put into your work, what you're saying, how you react to feedback, that says everything about you. The stuff that you have, the merch that you have around you, it's stuff. It's stuff that you bought with money. It's stuff that you bought with money, ironically, that in many cases you're using to promote your nerd cred as you diminish, insult, berate, belittle other people who have that stuff not to show off and peacock, but because they enjoy it. I found that to be the most obnoxious thing, is that you have these people who continuously try to establish themselves as some kind of nerd expert, geek culture expert, and then they take that opportunity to display all this stuff and use it as flair, and then take shots and insult fans. So this clip from Chris Stuckmann that I played at the beginning of the video, it's indicative of a much larger problem, which is why I'm highlighting it here. This should be made an example of, and that's what I'm doing here. But if you're somebody who's considering acting like this, whether you're in the media, whether you're a corporation, whether you're a YouTuber, my recommendation would be to stop, rethink what you're doing, and understand that this just makes you look bad. It's an insufferable and insulting way of dealing with criticism. Because there's nothing wrong with people who didn't like The Rise of Skywalker. In fact, in my view, they are correct, because I have that same opinion. I was disgusted with this movie. From the lazy and cheap reveals to just what happened with Palpatine, all of that stuff was diminishing to the original trilogy. It was insulting to Anakin's legacy. It was embarrassing to watch as this franchise that I've grown up loving was reduced to nothing more than fodder for a Mary Sue character like Rey that people despise and they don't like and don't want anything to do with, because she is a feminist creation. A series of checklists in a boardroom saying, well, what do we want in a strong, empowered woman? Well, we want this, 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 and this. So they put her on God mode. Don't give her a character. Don't give her any type of backstory that makes sense. Oh, yeah, she's a Palpatine now. Oh, I mean, why, how, where? Nothing makes sense. Nothing's explained. Nothing's laid out. It's just a convoluted, nightmarish mess that J.J. Abrams put together, probably when he was drunk, to try to make sense of what Rian Johnson did and Kathleen Kennedy. He tried to make this cohesive, but unfortunately it just turned out to be an incoherent, unbearable mess. And you'll see this more and more, that when people really think about what they've seen, when they really examine the disrespect to the original trilogy and the prequels, I think they will fully understand why people have the position that they have. But to Chris Stuckmann and people like him taking that attitude, what I say to you is that you are wrong. You are perfectly entitled to be wrong. You're perfectly entitled to that opinion. But please spare me this first year psychobabble bullshit where you're trying to tell me that the reason I don't like this is because of this. No, I love Star Wars. I love some of the content that's come out of Star Wars, from the comic books to the video games to the novels even. Star Wars has produced some great stuff, including The Mandalorian. So it's not about that. It's not about nostalgia. It's not about being a kid. It's not, you want to recapture the feeling of when you were a kid. No, I'm quite content being an adult. I just like things that are good. Good characters, good story. Interesting stuff. I don't like woke progressive ideologies. I don't like Mary Sue characters that are on God mode. I don't like breaking a universe and its lore for the convenience of a character like Rey. No, sorry. Don't like it. Not at all. Don't like characters like Kylo Ren doing what they did. At the end. I'm not going to spoil it because this isn't really a spoiler video, but I wanted to comment on this. I wanted to give my feedback because I think it's important. I think it's important that somebody, anybody, push back against this because it's dishonest, it's weak, it's cowardly, and I find it to be detestable. So, that's where I'm going to end things. Thank you, all of you, for watching. Whether you agree with my opinion or you disagree, I still appreciate your feedback. I appreciate you leaving comments in the chat. I appreciate you entirely because without you, there'd be no reason for me to do this. And you guys give me the ability to do something that I love to do. And it means the world to me. Every one of you. And I mean that genuinely. You guys mean the world to me. And so when I watch guys like this, these milquetoast, fence-sitter, beta male man-children that surround themselves in merch to peacock about how much of a nerd they are, come after you, it bothers me. It bothers me greatly. And so maybe I'm not as diplomatic as I should be, but that's my opinion. That's what I feel about this. It really pisses me off when I see somebody behave in this way and treat people who have valid criticisms as little more than children that they just simply don't like this because they're not children anymore and they want that feeling. No, I just want things that are good. That's all. I've seen things as an adult that I didn't see as a child regarding Star Wars that I absolutely love. New characters, new settings, new worlds, new lightsabers, new pretty much anything. I'm open to anything as long as it's good. So, rejected Chris Stuckmann. And ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate what you give me the ability to do. I appreciate those who agree. I appreciate those who disagree. And that's where I'm going to end things. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I will see you next time.